Hey guys, my name is Sarah and I have the paper written by Bak. The title of this paper is Never Too Late, an advantage on tests of auditory attention extends to late bilinguals. This paper primarily talks about whether there are advantages for people with bilingual experience and how the age when they learned a second language influences executive control. First, we need to identify key words related to this paper. Our main one is executive control, and this refers to the higher level cognitive skills you use to control your cognitive behaviors, such as sustained attention, attention switching, and selective attention. Sustained attention involves the ability to focus on one specific task for a continuous amount of time without being distracted. Attention switching involves the ability to shift attention from one task to another. Selective attention involves the ability to direct the awareness to relevant stimuli while ignoring irrelevant stimuli in the environment. For example, when students are studying at Mozart, they're ignoring the sounds of talking and coffee grinding. Inhibition involves the ability to prevent the access of distracting information, and it plays an important role in selective attention. An example of inhibition is when you stop yourself from itching your mosquito bite. Next is the Simon task, and this task indicated that people respond faster and more accurately if there's a match between relevant stimuli and irrelevant stimuli. So for this example, a relevant stimuli would be the color, and irrelevant stimuli would be the location. Simon task was used to study the influence of aging in bilinguals on inhibitory control and attention in the visual domain. However, much is unknown about the differences in auditory processing between mono and bilinguals. This is where the test of everyday attention, or T, comes in. This assessment contains auditory tests, as well as visual tests that represents everyday tasks. It can also be used for people who have neurological diseases, such as stroke, head injury, and dementia, because it's clear enough, but it's sensitive enough to detect impairments. Also, T consists of several tasks that test different components of attentional functioning. It remains unclear whether there are differences in auditory processing between mono and bilinguals, and if advantages extend to those bilinguals who have learned their second language later in life. So the aim of this paper was to examine how bilingual experience affects executive control, and this was assessed through T, which consists of 5 subtests measuring different aspects of attention. They hypothesized that both early and late bilingual groups will benefit from bilingualism, but in different ways. Early childhood bilinguals will benefit from attention switching, while late childhood bilinguals will benefit from selective attention. For Experiment 1, 60 students from the University of Edinburgh who understood and spoke English fluently were required to answer the language ability questionnaire. The results classified 19 students as monolinguals, 23 students as early childhood bilinguals, and 18 students as late childhood bilinguals. There were no significant differences in age or gender distribution. For Experiment 2, 38 students who did not participate in Experiment 1 and also understood and spoke English fluently were required to answer the same language ability questionnaire. The results classified 19 students as monolinguals and 19 students as early adult bilinguals who acquired their second language between the ages of 15 and 19. Again, there were no significant differences in age or gender distribution. The first experiment examines whether the cognitive effects of bilingualism extend into the auditory domain, and how the age when they learned a second language influences executive control. Experiment 1 is split into 3 tasks: elevator counting with distractions, and elevator counting with reversal. In elevator counting, subjects were asked to pretend they're in an elevator whose door indicator is not functioning. so they have to guess which floor they're on by simply counting the tones of the same pitch. This task was used as a measure of sustained attention. In elevator counting with distractions, subjects had to count the low tones in the pretend elevator while ignoring the high tones. This task was used as a measure of selective attention. In elevator counting with reversal, subjects had to count up and down as they followed a sequence of different tones, low, middle, and high. If they heard a high tone sound, it meant the elevator would go up. If they heard a low tone sound, it meant the elevator would go down. And if they heard a middle tone sound, it meant the elevator had reached a new floor. The second experiment will help determine if there's a difference in the way mono and bilingual process conflicting sensory information. This experiment extends from the first experiment with two added visual tasks: telephone search and telephone search dual task. In telephone search, subjects are given a telephone directory and a page illustrating the target symbols. Then they're asked to circle all targeted symbols. In the telephone search dual task, subjects are asked to do the same as the telephone search task while simultaneously listening and counting the tones of the same pitch. The results in Experiment 1 indicated that there was no significant difference between the groups in Elevator Task 1. However, in Elevator Task 2, which tested selective attention, late childhood bilinguals scored higher than monolinguals. In Elevator Task 3, which tested attention switching, early childhood bilinguals scored higher than monolinguals. The results in Experiment 2 were similar to the results in Experiment 1, where there were no significant difference in Elevator Task 1, and bilinguals scored higher than monolinguals in Elevator Task 2 and 3. There was no significant difference between the groups in the telephone search and telephone search dual task. The results did not differ between mono and bilinguals because these tasks did not require the same sense to conflict as seen in Task 2 and 3. The results show that there is a positive effect of bilingualism in all three groups. However, bilingual groups did not perform better on all attentional tests. Late childhood bilinguals scored higher in selective attention, while early childhood bilinguals scored higher in attention switching. The researchers speculate that late childhood bilinguals have better inhibitory control because, in order to prevent ongoing interference, they must inhibit the language not in use. In conclusion, this experiment was tested using the tests of everyday attention to examine how bilingual experience affects executive control, while past experiments involving bilingualism examined the visual domain. The present study tested auditory processing of mono and bilinguals. The experiment will encourage further research using a wider range of auditory tasks and age groups to determine which aspects of cognitive processing in bilingualism affect cognitive aging as well as dementia.